Thank you for joining me for this episode of Higher Dimensions. I'm your host, Aaron Tomlinson, and I want to continue to talk about living from the heart. I want to talk about hope, but I want to combine in this video the subject of hope and faith. And I want to clear up some misunderstandings about faith, particularly for those who have read the Bible or come from the Christian tradition or community. One of the definitions, or a definition that people often point out when they're looking in the Bible, comes from the book of Hebrews chapter 11, the first 3 verses. Now, your modern translations like the NIV and some of the others, New American Standard, translate Hebrews 11:1 something like this: faith is the confidence of things that we hope for and the assurance of things that we do not see. If you go back to older translations, the King James Version, any modern variation of the King James Version, like the New King James Version, you discover that the word confidence or assurance isn't in there. It says something more like this: faith is the substance, or it starts out now, faith is the substance of things that we hope for, the evidence of things not seen. Now, I don't know about you, but there's a pretty big difference between substance and confidence, between evidence and assurance. So why the discrepancy? Well, I want to explain it for a little bit, and hopefully it'll help us understand some things about faith that maybe we didn't understand before, and maybe also clear up some reasons why it seems that our faith at times is ineffective if we adopt ourselves to that translation. The actual Greek word in Hebrews 11, chapter 1, for confidence or substance is a Greek word called hypostasis. And oddly enough, when you understand the Greek context for that word, and I'm not talking about just looking it up in your Strong's Concordance or in your Bible dictionaries. I'm talking about understanding how substance, or hypostasis was used in classical Greek theology in the Hellenized world during the time of Jesus and the apostles. I think it shines a lot of light on what the author is trying to say, and also why your older translations translate it as substance. Incidentally, the Latin translation is substantia, which is where we get the word substance. So how did confidence or assurance get into our Bibles? It's a very interesting study, and I don't have time to go into all of it, but suffice it to say that it is a byproduct of the Protestant Reformation and the issue of justification by faith versus sort of a works Catholic salvation or buying indulgences or what have you. During that time period, the issue of faith centered around the afterlife, justification. How did we know that we were right with God, and how did we know that we would gain heaven and shun hell? For me, it was built completely on a faulty foundation, but that is for a different video. The truth is, when you look at the Bible, you look at the scriptures, you look at the teachings of Jesus, faith is always tied to outcomes and the miraculous and the supernatural. I can't really find anywhere where faith is emphasized as agreement with a set of doctrines or propositions that we take from the scriptures, and certainly most of the descriptions of faith have very little, if anything, to do with the afterlife. It has to do with rearranging the order of the physical realm according to your own will and desire. For example, in Mark chapter 11, verses 22, 23, 24, Jesus says, have faith in God, in most translations, although that's another poor translation, but we don't have time for it. The actual translation of it is, have the faith that comes from God, or the God kind of faith. And then he says, whoever says to this mountain, be removed and cast into the sea, but does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will happen, he will have whatever he says. Therefore, what things soever you desire when you pray, believe you have received them, and you will have them. So in that teaching on faith, at least, Jesus is definitely connecting faith with changed outcomes and answered prayer. He's connecting it with moving mountains and doing the impossible, doing the things that we read about in the scriptures. He's not concerned about justification by faith or the afterlife. He's trying to teach his disciples how to work the very works that he did. So our understanding of faith as being assurance or confidence comes several centuries later, and again, it's a poor translation. But it leads us into error because we begin to believe that faith is all about intellectual agreement or intellectual assent. It's actually about hoping, for a lot of people, the way they apply faith, they're hoping that they can demonstrate to God enough that they agree or believe in some outcome that they're hoping to get that will happen for them in the future. And they're expecting God to respond to that, to be impressed by that, to be moved by that, and answer their prayers. And very seldom does it work. Sometimes it does, but if we're honest, the odds aren't very good. And after all, as they say, a blind squirrel finds a nut, and a dead clock is right twice a day. So we can't really go off of, results that don't have consistency. So let's come back to the original word in the Greek, hypostasis. If you look it up in your concordance, it means something that stands beneath or something that stands behind something else. It might contain with it the idea of a foundation, something that stands underneath a building that you cannot see. But this really wasn't the Greek concept of hypostasis. The Greek concept of hypostasis ties into their entire cosmology and understanding of the universe. Plato and some of the philosophers of that time believed in what was called the world soul. They believed that everything in creation had consciousness or thought or intelligence or logos that was an invisible substance that was, an invisible source, sort of an abstract source out of which consciousness came, that was animating or giving life to the entire universe, so that the whole universe was alive and the whole universe had consciousness, and that consciousness could be touched or impacted by our very thoughts and feelings. Now we come to the concept of hypostasis. Hypostasis was the invisible substance out of which everything in the material world came into being. It was an actual substance that later on alchemists believed that they could take that actual substance, and if they could manipulate it, they could change the quality of any material thing. Thus, they could change lead into gold, Jesus changing water into wine. All of that was happening at this invisible layer of reality that the Greeks called the hypostasis. So if we are going to understand faith, then we have to understand that we're not talking about intellectual assent. We are talking about making conscious, intentional contact with that field of energy. You might say in a modern sense, the quantum field, the mind of God. Greg Braden calls it the divine matrix. Making contact with that field and being able to work with it in order to bring a future possibility into our present reality. And that brings me to the difference between hope and faith. Hope has to do with the future. No one hopes for something that they already possess or that they already have. Now, I've been hearing a lot lately, a lot of people saying that time and space does not really exist, that everything that's ever happened and everything that will happen and everything that's happening now is all happening in the present moment. Now, that may indeed be true, and it could be if you hold to that belief, then, I don't want to challenge that belief. I'm just saying, for me, I can't get my mind around that. Perhaps it's because I'm not awakened to it or enlightened to it, or perhaps I'm just not at the level of consciousness yet to grasp it. That is quite possible, and I'm willing to concede that point. However, it doesn't seem to me to be very practical when it comes to hope and faith and the reality of living our lives in this three-dimensional world, because let's face it, whether it's a distortion of our minds or just a product of this three-dimensional world, we all experience events as happening in the past, happening to us in the moment, or in the future. One of the difficulties that I have with that proposition is it sounds to me, or feels to me rather, I think that's a better way to say it, it feels to me like the same old sort of predestination of Calvinism or fatalism of the ancient world, that you are basically, your future is determined by the stars and by your birthday, and that you're just a victim of fate and of chance, or a victim of your stars. Because after all, if everything's happening in the moment, then how do we affect change as we're living in this time-space world? Doesn't that mean that whatever's happening now, the future's happening, and so it's predetermined? I just haven't become conscious of it or walked into it yet. That's my 2 cents on that. Let's come back to hope and faith. Hope is in the future. Here's how I would define hope. Hope is the belief in a positive outcome that you will experience, but that you are not experiencing today or in the present moment. I'm going to say that again a little bit differently. Hope is the belief in a positive outcome that you will experience in the future, but you are not experiencing right now. I would like to add that from my understanding of it, hope is also just a potential positive outcome. See, at any given moment, there are an infinite amount of possibilities that are available to us. And to a large degree, our choices determine our timeline, what timeline we'll be on. For example, if you're still listening to this video, which I appreciate if you are, if you're still listening to this video versus choosing to log off in the first couple of minutes of the video, then your timeline has you experiencing me talking to you in this video. Had you made the choice that I'm sure other people made to turn me off a couple minutes into it, you would not be hearing me, and that would be determining your timeline. So it's a simple example, but we can see that our future is determined to a large degree by what we choose and by what we do. And one of the great things about faith is faith gives us access and empowerment to actually make that good potential possibility that we're thinking about in the future a reality that we will experience by moving out and beyond the five senses, our five physical senses, and moving into the very matrix of creation, moving into the very hypostasis, or the very substance and essence of the thing that we're hoping for, so that we can participate and create it so that it will manifest for us as our future reality. To make the point further from the context of the scripture, the writer goes on in verse 3 and he says, "For by faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that things which are seen, that are currently presenting themselves to us in our present moment, the things which are seen, were not made of things which are visible." That means that there are invisible things. That hope, that potential possibility, is an invisible reality. It has an essence, it has a substance. Let's look at it this way. It has an energetic essence that has not yet been formed and shaped and worked with so that it can be brought into our present experience. And faith allows us the opportunity to go into that matrix and sort of hack creation, if you will, so that we can have and experience for ourselves the good thing that we are hoping for. Faith is always in the future. Hope is always in the future. Faith is always in the now. So how do we do this? The first thing we have to do is we have to begin to sort of deny our present circumstances. By denying, I don't mean a pathological denial where you won't take responsibility for your life or your situations. I'm just saying that we are recognizing that our present reality is subject to change, and that we have the ability and power by hope and faith to transform our current reality into the future reality that we're hoping for if we operate in the level of faith. So we have to be able to take our consciousness, if you will, make it simple, our minds, and I'll go into the structure of that in just a moment, but we have to be able to take our minds into that future possibility and experience that future possibility as though it was happening to us right now. When we do that, we send an energetic signature that begins to cause the substance, the invisible substance, the hypostasis of what we're hoping for, to vibrate at a certain frequency that begins to attract it and draw it into our experience that we then experience as a miracle, as a healing, as an answer to prayer, or simply as a synchronicity. So that means that faith is something that happens when we are in faith. We are operating in a very focused, a very deliberate state of consciousness. Now this can set us free because we can operate in a very focused state of consciousness for a few minutes and affect reality at the level of the hypostasis without worrying about my mind telling me I don't think that this is ever going to happen. So Here's the components that we need. Here's how we can make it practical. First of all, there has to be intention or will. What is it that you will to have in the future? I guess you could say, backing up even further, you have to see a good outcome for yourself. You have to know exactly what it is that you want to see manifested or drawn into your life. And you have to be relatively specific about it. It's not enough to say, well, I want to be blessed or I want to have good things. That's a start, and there's nothing wrong with that. That is a start. It's like a lump of clay. But you have to begin to mold that lump of clay by asking yourself, what is this blessing going to look like when I have it? What is it going to feel like? What's it going to sound like? What's it going to be different in my life when I get this thing? And then you have to set your intention, your will to good, to have that very thing that you are hoping for. So let's take a few examples. Let's take three. Let's say that you want more financial abundance in your life, or you want more health and healing in your life, or you want to transform a character flaw, personality flaw, something about yourself that gives you trouble, causes problems for you, that you would like to see yourself not manifesting in the future. You can take any one of those three or all three, but I would suggest that you break it down and set aside time to release faith or to operate in the realm of faith, that's probably a better way to say it, on the specific issue that you're working on. So you set your intention. So let's say it's for a greater level of financial abundance. What does that financial abundance look like? How much financial abundance? Try to be as specific as you can without being too far out into something that's really difficult for you to believe or difficult for you to receive, at least at first. So let's say you want to increase 5% of your salary, or you want to bring in 5% more money than you did before, or you want money to buy a car, something like this. You ask yourself the question, what am I going to use this money for? Is this something that I really want to have? What might be the downsides of this? You do all of this ahead of time, and then you set your intention. You say, I will to have greater financial prosperity in my life. I will to have greater abundance in my life. Once you've done that, you've set your will, then you shut out your five senses, and with your mind, with your emotions, and with your imagination, you begin to give form and shape out to what you're hoping for. So when you set your intention, I'm going into the hypostasis, now you're working with the very thing that is the substance of what you're hoping for. And your thoughts, your imagination, your intention, your will, and your feelings begin to give structure and form out of that substance. You could look at it this way, that the substance is the clay, but as you work with your thoughts, as you work with your feelings, as you work with your imagination, you are beginning to create out of that clay the very sculpture of the thing that you want to have through the power of your mind. The imagination is very important here because you can take yourself into that future reality and you can begin to shape it as though it were present right now. You can begin to say, I have this thing right now. I have this thing right now. I possess it. I may not possess it in physical reality yet. I may not possess it in my current moment, but it is my hope, it is my intention, and through the power of my imagination, on the theater of my imagination, I am experiencing this right now. Now, I realize that some of my listeners have maybe some more trouble imagining things than others. All I can say is try. It really does help. If you can't see it in fine technicolor detail, that's okay. If you can't use it at all, that's fine too. Set your intention and use your thoughts to think about, what is this going to be like when I have it? What's going to be different in my life? I'll have more financial freedom. I'll have the car that I want. I won't be worried as much about paying my bills. Whatever the case may be, I'll be able to do more to help people, whatever your reasons are. And that's why it's a good idea to just take time and say, if I get this, what am I going to do with it? What's my life going to be like? So you're in that place in sort of a meditative state where you're thinking about these things, you're imagining these things, you're intending yourself to have these things, and then the last part of it is you have to get your feelings into it as well. What's it going to feel like when this thing is a reality? And when you can line all of that up, your will, your hope, your intention, your imagination, your thought about it, and your feeling about it, now you're leaving an energetic imprint on the energetic substance of the hypostasis. And by saying to yourself, I have this now. This is mine now. You are doing something very powerful because you are bringing it out of the future of potential possibilities and you're taking hold of it and you're bringing it in to your present moment and into your now. So you are creating an energetic connection. You can think of it like an energetic fishing pole. You are connecting with that hope in the sea of possibility that you're hoping to draw to yourself. You're making the connection, and as you do these things, and as you say, I have it now, you're reeling it in so that you're using the law of attraction, you're using the law of faith, and you're bringing that thing into your present reality. I hope this has been a blessing to you. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I'd like to invite you to do so by hitting the subscribe button at the bottom, hitting the notification button so that you know when I'm putting out more videos. And of course, as always, please give me your feedback at the bottom. And thank you for taking time, your very valuable time, to spend this time with me and listen to what I had to say. And I hope wherever you are, that you are blessed and that it is great for you. Once again, this is Aaron Tomlinson with Higher Dimensions. Thank you for listening.